It's a continuation of our program. Now we have an interactive section, a round table, and of course not a table, not really a round table, but devoted to the safety of the internet service provider. Artem Grichenko will moderate. Chairs will be placed. Now please introduce the participants and please come up to the stage. While chairs are being placed, I'd like participants to come up to the scene and let's introduce ourselves. And then we will start discussion. We are going now to the communication street. I'll start from myself. I'm Artem Gavrichenko. For 10 years, I've been doing monitoring of network safety, namely the last 7 years of DDoS. This topic is on the cross point of conventional network, conventional safety. From time to time, I look at one direction or into the other direction. I have an accumulation of knowledge that I'd like to discuss with you and maybe to add up something. So I decided to discuss with you the issues of safety in the internet provider sphere. We plan to have 5 participants, but unfortunately one of our participants didn't manage to come up. Alex, I'll give the floor to you. Alexei Smirnov, Open Network Association expert. We have Alexander Zimov, who gave talk yesterday. Alexander Zimov. For many years, I have been an architect, filter curator, and I do analysis and identification of problems at BGP routing. Digital security, Vlad Voronkov. Good afternoon, Vladislav Voronkov. I am dealing with the safety of web. Our company deals with the safety of everything. The first question that I'd like to discuss, the first issue I'd like to discuss. And we have one more participant. For him, we will be translated our discussion. Well, the first question, the first issue I'd like to discuss is the following. Let's start with the fact that in September 2016, US CERT issued a document with recommendations for internet providers that was concentrated on the threats related to vulnerability in the network equipment, namely sinful NOC and GPOL. Recommendations were given that the next 1 or 2 years, during the next 1 or 2 years, the vulnerability threat in net equipment will become advanced, persistent threat, will become constant, and they will be detected in this equipment. The chronology proved that US CERT conclusions in 10 days' time, the vulnerability of the 0 day is detected in PIX, CISCAR, BINICERT. In October, the similar vulnerability identified in Juniper equipment. In March and May, once again, vulnerability detected in Cisco, not speaking about vendors like MikroTik, Huawei, and others domestic of domestic level. Even these fundamental things happened. First of all, I'd like to ask Vlad. Vlad, digital security company. How did you deal with this problem? At what extent? Can you comment? What's happening? Why is this huge interest? And what's happening to this equipment, network equipment? First of all, I'd like to say that vulnerability issues, they have always existed, not in equipment, but globally. As to sister vulnerability, they are visible because Cisco is a large, huge supplier of equipment, and they know about these vulnerability issues with the network equipment. Colleagues studied JetPlo. It's a kit for Cisco, sister, that published by Sedobroke. It's a kind of an implant that is built into the and managed to remotely to govern router. Router didn't listen to any port. You can't detect that the equipment is infected. This implant is built in not only remotely to some hacked equipment, but the equipment may be delivered with this implant so that physically this implant can intercept some routers. The work that was done in JetPlo, it's a fundamental work because Cisco has a great number of systems, operating systems, architecture, and in this implant, this system was supported. My colleagues did additional equipment to this implant on the platform of Cisco. They did the work that did the creators of this implant, but for the different architecture, showing that it's impossible, that a restricted number of people, I think 4 guys, they showed that they can do the same. This equipment, for many years, we thought that this equipment exists and it's functioning. It's not just, it's clear that it's a very difficult software. It contains very difficult software, but it has the similar problems as the conventional computer. What level of problems? The problems are that there is no verification at the very lowest level. Technically, we have different methods of verification. They use TPM. In case of a conventional computer, it's a kind of a hardware that is existed on the maternal board or just built in. It's very simple. Our beers sends all the measures, nearly all from the very beginning of uploading on the computer. And it can retain some coding keys. As far as I know, if this approach is applied in embedded equipment, and namely in routers, there are a great deal of these devices. So these implants are possible because this implant is a kind of a kit that is built into the BIOS analog in routers and other portable devices and intercept some functions that work at their highest level. Because even smartphones, the module of uploading, confident uploading does exist. It was promoted because everyone would like to do this. Thank you. I'd like to see if I'd like to ask some words. Rick, we start with you. What this situation, this news, what does it mean for a ISP, for conventional ISP? What kind of measures are to be undertaken or not to be undertaken? Shall we worry about this threat? Shall we do something? Or it's something that it's a kind of fashionable thing and it will disappear?
Well, first of all, I apologize, only speaking English here. And thank you for the opportunity to talk. I've maybe spent a little bit too much time yesterday enjoying your hospitality.
Get well soon.
Yeah. So you're talking about you're asking a question about a specific, sounds like a bug in some firmware within hardware. I think things are improving as I heard from you, Alex, that definitely you have things like TPM chips, you have secure modules within phones and stuff to make sure software gets updated when it has to get updated. And that's clearly a key with the Mirai virus and various other things. There needs to be some mechanism where we can push updates out to all these things. So my thoughts from the ISP perspective are first that you asked the question, what should ISPs do? I work at ICANN, so my perspective is very abstract. It's from the domain name side of things. But I think it's up to your customers. I also think it's ISPs serve in a very critical part of the trust chain within the ecosystem. And meaning that you guys see everything. And you guys are trusted just like the operating system. And it's a delicate balance, I think, but one where you could greatly improve the user experience by not only pushing updates out to CPE devices, whatever that may be. I think you're talking about a Cisco device specifically, but push CPE, but also to I'm a DNS guy, so
Okay.
you know, take a look at some of the DGA kind of, I'm not saying spying on customer traffic, but taking advantage of your point in the network to see infections before they spread. So you start to see DNS requests for strange looking domain names, and we all know what that means, right? You start seeing that, you say, well, there's a problem. Maybe helping notify customers. I don't work for any particular ISP in the US, but Comcast is a large ISP in the US with about 20 million, 21 million customers. One of the things they use to distinguish their service from others is they say, look, we are going to not only provide you with free malware, antivirus software, anti-malware software, whatever, free downloads, but we're also going to look out for you. And that includes pushing out updates to any CPE that they control, but also keeping an eye on your traffic and things like that. And more, well, people like us probably here in this room, we don't want anyone looking at our traffic. We don't want anyone to touch our stuff, right? But the vast majority of customers would benefit from that. And I think that trusted position that ISPs have in the system, like the operating system. You have no choice. You have to trust your operating system. It may be Microsoft, but that's too bad, right? And but the ISP is also in this position. I think this is something that could be leveraged to greatly reduce some of the problems that reach the public eye.
Okay, thank you. Great.
Alex, what do you think? I can't add anything because I completely agree with this saying. If there is a kind of common point that we can use our additional opportunities for the benefit of our clients. And if somebody would like to use this for hazardous things, we should pay attention to this.
Еще?
Any more comments? I will not ask you a moral question, but let's talk about some other perspective, talking about those aspects. We have a double problem, as I see it. There is a problem of vulnerability, but there is a problem of the typical attitude of a network operator. Sometimes he thinks that this is not his problem, and he's denying that he's responsible for that. And this type of denial impedes the others to realize those problems. Of course, and the vendors and providers of the network equipment, they do deny it as well. And I can recall those times when first studies about security were published for routing. Cisco issued different recommendations for security and safety with updates, and they specified the level of danger for different codes, and they stopped doing that only after the exploits were published, those that demonstrated the problems with the servers. I'd like to add one more example when the vulnerability is not a property of the hardware of the system. That is the problem of configuration. And there is a simple example, port number 179. And that is the port that is used for global communication. So I can kill this router from my laptop, actually. And as you are not checking that, and if you think that that's not your problem, then the mobile operators that faced this problem, it was difficult for them to realize that it was their problems. But if there is no timely reaction, you have to react in advance. We will find some time to discuss about awareness and about the involvement of operators in security matters. And now I would like to announce the following. In the lightning section today, we will have 5 to 7 minutes short reports dedicated to the problems of deploying the software and security equipment for service providers and network operators. It will be a very interesting lightning session. Please do come there and listen to these reports. So we've introduced that into the program only some hours ago. And before we turn to the involvement of operators, let's have a look at the following. So currently we face the situation. We are not talking about advanced persistent threat. I don't like this definition, because we are dealing with the safety and security issues and problems, and they are not accidental. This is a permanent threat, and I will not be talking about the fact that I do not like this term. For 5 years I have not liked that. From the point of view of associations, this term illustrates the situation quite well. Let's talk about the following situation. The analysts and the security specialists paid attention to the situation with the equipment. About a decade or 15 years ago, in one of the areas, we had similar situations that can describe this state of things. There were some companies that you know, Microsoft and Adobe, and they entered the 21st century with the similar security issues and problems. Adobe was like a Micromedia, and then they bought Flash. 15 years have passed. Over those years, Microsoft has resolved its security and safety issues. because they have great number of operation system. They worked a lot with SDL, with the security documents, and you have to understand that there are a large number of security threats that have been reduced. And let's now take the example of Adobe Flash. The situation has worsened significantly since then because the software is becoming more and more vulnerable. Almost they reach the zero level. They identify new vulnerabilities and they do not cope with that. And I'd like to ask the participants of this roundtable which types of measures the network operators can take to tackle those problems so that Cisco and large vendors take the path of Microsoft. How can we make them choose this path of action? And do not buy problematic equipment. Please try to follow the reputation of vendors. Yes, it's all about money. I do not see any other tools or mechanism to influence this situation. Because there is no other way of making vendor responsible for what he provides. That is the topic for a separate discussion, because that's a kind of impossible to introduce this type of responsibility and obligation. Currently, that's the only thing, to follow the reputation and to buy from those who have a good reputation. And in order to have it, the client and the customer and operators, they should have the understanding that these problems are significant and serious ones. It's not about only the price and the vendor, it's a broader range of issues. What about the vendors, the producers? Do we have the representatives of them in the room? Please express your opinion. Yes, a small comment from the audience that currently the vendors are in a denial, and then they can reach the new stage of rage, and after that we will be able to achieve positive results. My name is Pavel Kolesnikov. I can't say I'm representing Huawei company, I'm working there. It's not an official position of Huawei company. Before that, I used to work for Cisco Systems, and even before that, I was one of the golden partners in Cisco, and before that I used to work for Central Bank and was responsible for network security. And I have a wide range of experience and expertise. I can definitely say that any vendor of equipment is doing his best, everything he can in terms of providing, ensuring security. Cisco, Juniper, and Huawei, they have serious processes in order to avoid the zero-day vulnerabilities. So the vendors are preparing for those problems. You can laugh at that, but I know which internal processes are taking place in those companies. They do that and they are strictly compliant with that. No one doubts it. But you are talking about some malicious actions, but the problem is that the recent vulnerabilities that emerged, it happened after the code was published, and it was done by malicious people. No, it was done by people who are the foundation of the state, some public bodies. So you should change the vector there. The state and public companies and organizations were hired in order to do that. it's not about who identified vulnerabilities. No, it does not matter who found this vulnerability. No, it's about those who were operating with those vulnerabilities, and that was concealed from everybody. Yes, it's unacceptable situation, of course. Unfortunately, we can't do anything, almost anything with that. Yes, but this is about the changing their direction, because the resources that malicious people have, they cannot be compared to the reserves that state bodies have. Well, I do not agree with you and the colleagues from digital security. They showed us what has been done. Something is said without a microphone.
So I completely agree with Alex, although I'm not, I don't think we quite see eye to eye as far as what the solution goes. I mean, it's awareness, right? The problem here is hard to solve. There's been some discussions out there regarding some discussions out there regarding how to solve some of the problems, you know, particularly after the Mirai virus issue. Some of the discussions are scary. I had a couple startups before this, and I sold network equipment. The network address translator inside Microsoft is my product that, you know, whatever, a couple of us did in a garage in 1998 or something. But so I certainly don't want to be held to any higher level of liability regarding my software. But if you've tracked any of the discussions, say at the RSA meetings or some of these security meetings, very public security meetings, there's thinking going that, well, maybe we should make people that write software or companies that write software just as responsible as people who make cars. That sends shivers up my spine as a developer. You know, that's like all of a sudden that kills all innovation. So I kind of agree with, I kind of agree with Alex that it's got to be a choice. You look at the reputation of the vendor, you decide who you want to go with. I mean, that seems like where we're stuck. And so that's all I have to add there, really.
Thank you. У меня вопрос к аудитории.
I have a question to the audience. Can you raise hands? Those of you that are working for network operators or service providers. Okay, and now raise hands those who work with the information security awareness, constantly updating. Okay, fine. Now I have a question. That's all good, that we say that providers and operators should pay special attention to those security issues and to update constantly. But the question is about how we should organize this process. What I mean is that, for example, the zero-day vulnerability can be published at 3 a.m. Moscow time, and at 6 exploits are published. What tools can we use for that purpose? Vlad, maybe let's start with you. What do you think about that? What tools can we use for making this work more efficient and to make your network more secure? I'd like to ask another question. Why aren't we installing the updates? Do we have any problems with that? As far as I know, in the past, people used to work only one type of routers and the firmware, and the latest version they introduced some changes. But they were using this type of firmware where you knew exactly what will happen. And now, do we have any problems with installing the latest version of firmware? This is the question about the major tests. Do vendors perform those tests or not? Microsoft? Yes. I was responsible for Microsoft MTS campaigns and all the updates we were preparing, we had to approve them, to test them, and only after that we implemented that in major networks. So large vendors do not have problems with that. No, the large vendors, they test it and then they implement it, and with the patches, the implementation of patches needs a very extensive process of approval for Megaphone, for MTS, before they actually embed it and before they implement that, because they face high risks. I'd like to ask a question to you, because you have an extensive experience in working with the network equipment vendors. Practically, we do not have this problem, but in the past, we used to have this problem. So how much time did it take to resolve it? So the problem was the following one. With IP options, with via CMP, you can set an option when you in network equipment, you specify certain parameters. And with this record, it was actually implemented not on the chip, and respectively, all the network devices were vulnerable in this respect. And it took years to resolve this problem. Of course, vulnerability was there, and in spite of the fact that it was critical, so major equipment vendors, it took them years to resolve that. The main problem is not to do any damage. It should not cause massive problems around the world. I'd like to add something to that. If you are a large operator and you face a problem, you have agreement with the vendor that in the framework of the special support program, they take the patch, the security patch, they should definitely test it. And what those who do not have such a good situation, what should they do?
I'll try to answer this question. My opinion is very simple. We should conceal your network equipment so that it would be impossible to find this, and you will solve the certain part of your problems. But in principle, the internal infrastructure is exposed, undoubtedly. Part of the problems I mentioned, and you won't let yourself down. For example, we are talking about vulnerability of transit packages. You can't conceal this. It's a very good comment. Much vulnerability that has been found, it deals with the internal things, internal infrastructure. If a provider gives the access to internet, to the interface using these routers, he is himself to blame. Pavel Lunin called us from France. It's a question, a comment. Having heard what you've been talking about, I have an opinion that the main risk from the operator, it's DDoS, the internet, not from the point of view of confidentiality or integrity of the data. It has never been the reliable environment. We don't have the 100% confidence that this package is safe. And today, for an operator, for the carriage company, the largest risk is not to deliver the package from Google to a client and vice versa. The other things are not very important. If this package was tipped or are whether the most important things are that not somebody modifies or tempered with this package. I mentioned the program NSA that deals with non-targeted delivery of exploiters. You come up enter the internet and you are given something that may break down your computer. I'd like to answer this question. Large operators that provide the services as a kind of SLA, they read down the time. They are obliged that all the packages will be in time, and then delays. These are 2 points that are main points for the operators, for IP transit companies. I can't but add that as to business risks of operators, that some their customers will be hacked, it's less important than DDoS, or they may lead to the fact that the services started to degrade. Everything is accessible, but the delays have been extended. If we shift from accessibility talk to reliability of transmission, now in the audience and on the scene, we have one of the largest experts of DNSA, Richard. Today we will have the presentation of this topic, but maybe in few words, what's the problem with the implementation DNSA? Why we can't roll it out to make the network safer and secure? Maybe 2 points, not more. Main 2 points.
Yeah, well, if I could answer that, I guess I'd be out of a job. But the two main one of the main reasons for DNSSEC's lack of deployment is CDNs. I'm not going to name any particular industry, but the DNS is used. The DNSSEC protects from the DNS from lying to you, and CDNs basically work that way. Many of them, even some of the ones inside large organizations. I would think that's one of the major, that's the first reason. The second reason is perceived complexity of deploying DNSSEC. One of the things that, again, Comcast is an example, a very good example. They deployed DNSSEC within their whole large ISP, deployed that within their infrastructure and for all their customers. And people probably already heard this case, but so at some point, our government in the U.S. is, not, well, like most governments, not the most intelligent, not the most capable. They deployed DNSSEC as part of a mandate, and they deployed it improperly. And so people could not get to NASA.gov, our space agency, and at the time there was a huge assumption that this was a conspiracy between NASA and the government and the ISP to try to block access. It simply was poor implementation. Bottom line, for the ISP, DNSSEC causes some problems. I know my job is to try to promote it, but anytime you add security, you make a system more brittle, and it made it more difficult. So because of complexity, and because some systems rely on being able to use the DNS to do load balancing and sharing, these are the two reasons why DNSSEC has not been deployed. In my view, I would love to hear other views.
У меня все-таки будет один провокационный.
I have a provocative question, and I warn you. Recently, the carriage companies has done much for security, but they didn't know that they were doing this for security reason. Many carriage companies started to substitute advertisements. They start stimulate HTTPS and implement HTTPS. Shall I continue? The question is, if we code HTTPS, the niche of DNSSEC, is it increasing in size or diminishing? Are these processes parallel or they are interconnected? This HPS everywhere, constant implementation of TLS. I had a graph in my presentation. According to telemetry Firefox, recently the number of coded sites increased double-fold. In principle, even if there is no DNSSEC, we can't do meter because certificate is a confidence certificate. It can't be faked. I have a question. These processes, implementation, DNSSEC, do they support each other or they interfere in each other's work? We used to have DAY in DNSSEC. It's a technology that allowed a SECAC HTTPS certificate to use certificate from the domain recording. It used to be supported in Chrome, but it's not the case now. What are the reasons for this? Are there any way out to get back this system or so that companies, they can use their generated certificate without confidence centers? And I think it will increase the spread to shift the load from operators to the system guys, system users.
Excellent question. Thank you. I think they're parallel. I mean, go back to the beginning of your discussion. DNSSEC and SSL certificate, TLS, are parallel. We all know about Let's Encrypt, right? Very popular, right? And this is great. So SSL everything, right? TLS everything. Yeah, sorry. So a wonderful idea. However, DNSSEC, I still believe, and I truly believe, not just because I'm paid to believe, but I truly believe it provides a parallel track. It provides another source of trust on the network. You have certificate authorities, as you mentioned. That's one source of trust. DNSSEC is another source of trust. And to be completely open about this, to me it's not so much about simply securing the DNS, right? I mean, the reason I'm here and still doing this stuff is because this provides another opportunity to deliver keys. Right? I mean, you guys have all heard of DANE. I mean, there are ways to put other things in the DNS, not just A records, not just IP addresses, but to put other things in there and distribute things in a secure manner that we could use to then have end-to-end secure email, for example. In the U.S., there's efforts to try to use this to deliver secure configurations to things. So I think they complement each other. I think SSL, TLS, security, and DNSSEC complement each other, but as you alluded in your initial question, it's sometimes hard to separate the two, because if you have everything SSL or everything TLS, why do I need DNSSEC? I got security, right? Well, the Let's Encrypt, for example, or a lot of SSL certificates, they don't necessarily require a lot of verification or validation of the owner of the certificates. And so I think it's always good to have other options. No one option is perfect. So.
I would like to add that I can't reject, I can't deny what's better and what less better. The more we witness the attempt to interfere with the traffic that we don't like, the more we have mechanisms to prevent this, but it's not in every case perfect. We are running out of time. I have the question to the discussion participants. Please, in 30, 20 seconds, say maybe one word, the most important problem or the most important action that operators are to apply, are to do in the near future, or
embrace your place of trust in the ecosystem. People trust you as an ISP. So I think you could do a lot to help people, either as a service or whatever, to stem the tide of malware and attacks and all that. You see everything. I think that's a valuable vantage point.
Thank you very much. Alex?
Я добавил бы.
I would add, I have my own topic that I'm interested in this context. I want to see operators as the information source, as it's done with now with the DNS means. I want that current means for traffic analysis should be changed to get the global picture of security and to prevent the accidents. So we have the general picture. In Yerevan, there was the presentation on this topic, but we don't have the presentation on this topic here. From my point of view, there are 2 points. It's ownership of the network and monitoring what's happening outside of the network. I think we should react to accidents and not rate the security lower than accessibility. They should be at the similar level. We were talking yesterday. We were talking about the fact that BGP and TLS, they are technologies that they go together with each other in terms of security. The problems with equipment, the problems with the security of DNS, all these things, they are interconnected. And we would like to see the operators and other market participants who don't focus on one point, that step by step they furrow their land in all the directions, step by step. I would like to, we want to see this moving forward in all the directions. I think here we have the consensus, what we want from operators. It's a very small technical issue, how to make operators interested in this in terms of business, so that they will respond positively to our attempts. Now, according to our plan, in this room, outside there will be coffee, but you don't go here, don't go there, because now we will have the key signing PGP ceremony. Those who signed in the list, please remain here. Let's applaud to the panel participants. I'd like to remind you that ENOG, first and foremost, is participation. Communicate with your colleagues outside of the room, and please communicate with our brilliant American tourist. It's not very frequently that he is in Russia. If you have a question about DNSSEC, please approach him.